friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you episode 6 in my One Set 4 Ways series. I'm going to be using this stamp set by Paperie Ink called Bear Hugs, and I have stamped out all of my images onto a panel of Nina Solar White with Memento Tuxedo Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with my larger bear, so this could be a mama or papa bear, whatever you want it to be. And I'm coloring him with E53, E55, E57, and E59. So I'm going to lay in my shadows first with that E59. Since he's facing a little bit more toward the left, I'm going to put the shadows down on the right-hand side of his body, and then also a little bit under his head, and to separate him from the baby bear. And then I'm going to begin to blend that out with the E57. Now I wanted to mention that I am only going to be coloring one of these panels on screen today because I did them all the same with the same color palette. And the reason that I'm doing these on a panel rather than just stamping a bunch of images on one panel like I usually do is that these images do not have any matching dyes. So I'm going to have to color the background as well. So going back to my coloring now, I'm using E55 to blend out that E57, just saving a little bit of room on the face for the E53. Just because his face is so large, I decided to use 4 shades there. I am going to go back and do a double layer of all of these colors just to really help with the blend and make the transitions nice and smooth. And since I am only showing one panel on screen, I decided to leave that in the video. Sometimes I edit that out just because it's a little bit monotonous, but it does give you a clearer picture of how the image changes as you continue to color it and add that second layer. So I often do this whether or not I show it on screen, but I usually do tell you. But today I thought with these rich browns, it would just add a nice bit of depth by having that second layer. So I'm just going over everything just as I had it before, but just deepening those colors. So once I have the Papa Bear finished, I'm going to move on to the baby bear. And for the baby bear, I'm taking away the E59 and adding in the E51. So my darkest for the baby bear is that E57, and I'm just using it pretty sparingly. I don't want him to get too dark. I did notice that I forgot to color in the Papa Bear's other hand there, or his paw, so I just went ahead and added a bit of color to that, which I will finish up in a minute. And now I'm going to blend out the shadows on the baby bear with that E55. Now, because the Papa Bear is kind of leaning over him, there would probably be a bit of a deeper shadow on his face. I chose to make it not so deep just because I wanted it to be different there, and I didn't want the eyes to get lost. His eyes are really close to the top of his head, and I find that if you put a lot of dark color, over the eyes, they get lost, and then the critter just doesn't have any personality anymore. So I am going back over everything with the double layer to just, enrichen that color, but, I'm going to keep it fairly light up there. I mean, it's not a highlight, it's definitely still shadow, but it's lighter in comparison to the Papa Bear. So then I'm going to go and color the Papa Bear's muzzle, and I'm using the E53 and E51 for that, and then using the E51 for the baby bear. And I did go back with a second layer of that E53 and added just a touch of that to the baby bear's muzzle as well. And then I'm taking E79 to color in both of their noses. I'm going to move on to my bumblebee and the centers of my flowers, and for those I'm using Y13, Y15, and Y17, just coloring from the bottom up and giving those that nice bright pop of color since the bears are pretty neutral. And then the petals of the flowers I'm going to color R21, R22 and R24. This is kind of a coral pink color, and it's going to match the pattern paper that I'll be using, so that's why I chose those shades. So I just added a little bit of shading on the top right of each petal and then shaded towards the left. I also added some rosy cheeks to both bears with the R21, and then I went over the Papa Bear's cheeks with the R22 because the R21 just didn't show up at all. I'll take the BG10 to add a little color to the bumblebee's wings. And now I'm going to turn my panel here so that I can do the grass. So for the grass, I'm using YG61, YG63, and YG67. This is one of my favorite green combos. I really love how these colors blend. Unfortunately, I did not realize when I began these panels that my YG61 was running out of ink, and you need quite a bit of ink to color this much surface area and get it to give you a nice blend. And I was doing 4 panels exactly the same. And I started to realize here on this first one how streaky that ink was. So in hindsight, I wish I would have known. I maybe would have picked some different greens. The end result is a bit streaky, and I'm not really happy with how it turned out, but it is what it is. So I just had to continue because I didn't have a lot of time to film this today. I knew my kids were coming home from school pretty soon, and you know, these 4 cards in one video, it does take a bit of time, especially with this much coloring. Even though you're only seeing a small portion of it, you know, there was a lot of coloring off screen, so I just left it the way it was. For the background, I used BG10 and BG11, just BG11 toward the bottom where it meets the grass, and then just kind of doing some upward strokes, some flicking motions, and then blending with that BG10 where the BG11 left off, and kind of letting that fade into the white areas. Then I'm going to take one of the Lawn Fawn Stitched Circle Stackables, and I'm going to die cut that panel out and just pop that out of the die. And then I will show you the other 3 panels that I have colored. So there's all 4 of them all together there. So I'll set those panels aside and move on to my card bases. I'm using Lawn Fawn's Speckled Eggshell for all 4 cards, and I'm using Lawn Fawn's Dough ink to stamp on the inside of each card. So each card is going to get a different bear image and a different sentiment and a different bee than is on the outside. On some of them, I did also add some flowers, and on others, I didn't. I just wanted to keep things nice and centered. And I'm only showing you 2 of these, but I will show you all 4 at the end of the video. So the pattern paper that I'm using on today's card is the American Crafts Hey Hello collection by Jen Hadfield. So I'm just going to flip through and choose a bunch of pattern papers that I think will work well together. Not all of these will be used on one single card. I just don't know which ones I'm going to mix and match quite yet. So I'm trying to get some patterns that look good together, but also will match with some of the other ones that I'm pulling out here. So I'm just flipping through and seeing what I like. There were a couple that I ended up not using, and there were also a couple that I didn't pull out right here that I ended up using. So you'll see all of those in just a minute. But to start out, these are the ones that I had selected. So I'm making sure to choose some bright, bold prints. I'm also trying to pick some small prints like that black and white gingham and the pink daisy print, and also some tone on tone like the pink polka dot and the honeycomb pattern. The dies that I used to trim down my pattern papers was the Lawn Fawn Outside In Stitch Rectangle Stackables, the Stitch Party Banner die, and the Everyday Sentiment Banners. So now I am assembling card number 1. I'm using the honeycomb pattern for my base print, And then I'm going to add the black and white gingham down toward the bottom. I just trimmed that down a little bit smaller so you could see that bright yellow on all sides. And then this really pretty floral and bee pattern is going to go layered over top. And then I've got this little bit of pink. Hardly any of that's going to show. It'll just add a little pop of color on the outside edge on either side of the focal panel. I've added foam tape to the back of all of my focal panels. So I'm just going to center that on the card, make sure it's nice and straight and the sentiment is nice and straight as well, and then pop that down into place. For card 2, I am starting with this pretty pink floral. And all of my cards are going to have the same size base print. So that print that's going flat on the card was all trimmed down with the same die so that they all have that little bit of pattern, cardstock showing through on the outside edge. So this little piece I accidentally trimmed a little bit shorter, but then decided I wanted that banner. So I just glued it together, and that seam is going to fall underneath the focal panel so no one will ever know that that was cut in place. It's a great way to use some of your scraps. That was card number 2. Moving on to card number 3, I'm going to use the pink daisy print as my base print. Almost glued the wrong side there. So just putting that down into place. Always check and make sure that your card is facing the right way before you start adhering your pattern papers. Then I'm going to put this bright pink floral right across the center and then add the black and white gingham in the center over top of that, just going the opposite way. Here I've got another piece that I'm using some scraps to make up a banner. I didn't have quite a long enough piece, so I just trimmed it in half. That way I can make it as long as I need it to be. And once again, the seam is going to be underneath the focal panel so nobody will know. Just lining that up and popping that down into place. And then card number 4 is going to have that really bright floral. It's got lots of beautiful colors in there, but it's a little bit loud, so I'm going to tone it down by adhering the little pink daisy print over top of that, and I just selectively trimmed off the end into the flag banner. And then I'm going to layer the honeycomb print right over top, and then I'll grab my focal panel and adhere that right in the center as well. And I didn't realize as I was doing this that the only card that didn't get that black and white gingham was this one. So I am going to come back at the end of the video and just add a little bit of that to tie that in. I did want to mention that this company, Paperie Ink, is a brand new company. I just discovered them on Instagram. I talked about them in my latest haul video. They are just selling on Etsy right now, and they only have a few stamp sets so far, but I think their images are super cute. I did decide to add a little bit of crystal stickles to each of the cards. I'm adding it to the bee's wings and the centers of all of the flowers, just for a tiny pop of glitter. And then I'm going to go through and show you guys all of the insides of the cards as well. So here is the first one, and then there is the inside of that. I just made sure that each one had a different facing bear. So if the bear was standing on the outside, it was kind of laying on the inside. And I also made sure that they had a completely different sentiment than from the outside as well. I did use that longer sentiment twice on the inside just because I liked it so much. So here is where I realized that all 3 of the other cards had that black and white gingham, which really tied them together as a set, and this 4th card did not. So I just had a scrap of it left, so I die cut it with the Lawn Fawn Everyday Sentiments banner, and I trimmed that down in half so that I can adhere part of it down at the bottom and then make it look as if it's one long piece by adding the rest to the top. And that also just adds another layer of that pretty pattern paper. It was just the slightest bit too tall, so I trimmed off a sliver with my scissors, and then I'm just making sure that that is lined up nice and straight so it looks like one continuous piece. And that is going to complete my video for today. So there are all 4 cards. I just love these images from Paperie Ink. I think they are super cute and definitely an up-and-coming company to watch. You'll notice in the photos here that I did go back and add a few flicks of grass. I think that helped with disguising some of the blending issues, but my kids had come home right when I stopped filming, so I wasn't able to capture it on camera, but you can see it there. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. You can also ring that notification bell if you want to be sure that my videos always end up in your feed. And if you'd like to keep on watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy, so you can click on either one of those to check them out. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.